Our next speaker is Maria Francesca Sasa Montes. Sasa is the head of artificial intelligence and data policy of Union Bank, and she also serves as its data protection officer. She used to be the senior consultant and data protection officer of Spanish-based business process outsourcing company Indra, a position that exposed her to international standards for data protection. Prior to that, she is one of the pioneers of the Data Privacy Office of Globe Telecom and also of the Standards and Compliance Group of TV5 Network. She is also one of the authors of the book Data Privacy and Cybercrime Prevention in the Philippine Digital Age, with almost a decade of experience in IT governance, legal, compliance, cybersecurity, and data protection. So presenting on the topic data privacy in the present, the future, challenges in both the local and international context, Ms. Maria Francesca Sasa Montes.
Good day, everyone. I'm going to discuss data privacy in the present and future challenges in both local and international contexts. So you can see now the data protection and privacy legislation worldwide context. So this diagram and this map came from the United Nations. And as you can see, almost all of the countries have their privacy legislation not whether in place already or being drafted. So currently there are 66% of the countries with legislation on data protection, 10% countries with drafting legislation, 19% with no legislation yet, and 5% would have no data. So if you can see here, most of the countries all over the world have their data protection in place. Properly brief you what the challenges in the present and the future. You have to understand what privacy is and how it was conceptualized in the first place. So it was first conceptualized by Louis Brandeis and Samuel D. Warren. They're the luminaries in the US, and they said that the principle which protects personal writings and any other productions of the intellect or the emotions is the right to privacy. Right now, in this world, we now have the physical world and the online world, right? So in the offline world, we have our physical ID. So we either use it for going into building, purchasing stuff from the grocery store, or going inside a parking lot or a village where you, for example, present your driver's license ID for you to be able to go inside, right? So you control where your ID goes. However, in online identity, you will have minimal control over your information. So your identity would be given out to a repository which you would not have control with. So for example, your social media account, right? So while you control your settings, your information is stored somewhere else. And for example, in online shoppings, right? So you would have visibility, or you would have control and visibility over your purchases. However, these information are stored somewhere else, which you may not have direct control with. So for you to properly understand what privacy is throughout time, from the past, the present, and the future, you must remember these three key principles. 1, legitimate purpose. 2, proportionality. And 3, transparency. So I'll be going back to these principles at the end of this talk for me to highlight that these principles do not change. So for example, every time you process information or you consent to a certain processing of your information, there is legitimate purpose. Proportionality means that your personal information shall be adequate, relevant, necessary, and not excessive in relation to a declared specified purpose. And transparency means that you must always be aware of the nature, purpose, and extent of processing of your personal data. So let me take you back through time. Okay. The concept of privacy began in 1500s when the chimneys were invented or developed because in the cold countries, you have to, create beams, right? And while creating chimneys for the people to be warm by fire. So it created the concept of beams, meaning segmented spaces. And in retrospect, right now, for me, it was the first um, time that the concept of privacy was invented in our minds, such that in 1800s, 1816 to be exact, the invention of camera created privacy issues. Um, in fact, if you think about it, it's actually the elite people who have emerged these kinds of issue because they didn't really want to be exposed in that manner. So in the 1890s, there were the scandals, right? So the elite became the data subjects of certain publications. And it was also the same time when the right to privacy was conceptualized by Warren and Brandeis. So also, in side note, privacy was also developed when people began doing silent reading. So before the old times, so also you can also check the Bible, right? So people would converge in a place, in a big place, and then someone would read a manuscript, right? So, but when silent reading became popular in 1215, uh, it wasn't really that popular until the church mandated confessions for the masses. So the concept of private salvation ushered in a new habit of silent reading and contemplation. In 1700s, there were also solo beds. So before, people would just sleep in the same room in a big room, and then when you have a solo bed, it's a luxury. So when it became popular, it paved way for this sense of the right to be alone. The Holocaust proved that violation of the right to privacy would be deadly. So roughly 500 million Jews suffered the Holocaust because of privacy violation of being filtered out by the government based on their religion. So this is the reason why in 1948, the United Nations adopted the right to privacy as a human right. And in 1967, the Freedom of Information Act was enacted by the United States. And in 1969, ARPANET, the first electronic message, was sent. So this is the birth of internet in 1969. And also in 20th century, there were individual telephone lines were prohibitively expensive. So instead, neighbors share their own one line. So they know, people know before it as party lines. So commercial ads urge neighbors to use the shared technology with courtesy. So in 1981, Europe adopts Data Protection Convention. In 1989, Tim Berners-Lee came up with the World Wide Web. In 1993, CERN announced that the World Wide Web should be available to everyone. And this precipitated, in 1995, the creation of the European Data Protection Directive. If you can see here, the regulations on data privacy are responses to the emerging technology of the time. So like, for example, in 1940s, when the right to privacy by the United Nations was enacted, it is a response to what happened in the World War II. And then in 1995, when EU created the Data Protection Directive, it was a response to the emerging technology of the World Wide Web. So in 1999, Salesforce pioneered software as a service. Then in 2005, APEC adopted privacy framework. And in 2006, Amazon released Elastic Cloud Compute, or we call it now the EC2. And then in 2012, here in the Philippines, Data Privacy Act of 2012 was enacted, primarily because of the emerging need, not just of the data subjects here in the Philippines, but also globally, wherein multinational companies would need to have a local legislation equivalent to the legislation in other countries on data protection for them to engage business here in the Philippines. So this was driven by the BPO sector, naturally. So in Sideline, in 1995, the first chatbot, her name is Alice, was invented or was born. She was called Artificial Linguistic Internet Computer Entity. So the reason why we're highlighting the cloud here is, in 1990s up to this time is because the emerging issues or challenges that we're facing now in privacy will be cloud computing, because data sovereignty dictates that the laws in the jurisdiction where the data resides would be the one to be followed in terms of applicability. So, for example, when the data resides in Singapore, the laws of Singapore will apply in that data. So that's why we have to consider cloud computing as one of the emerging challenges. But they're very they're not really issues per se, but these are the things that we need to consider in this time when everything's digital and everything goes to cloud. And your phones, your iPhone would have cloud in it, right? So you have to understand where, or you have to know where your data goes, right? So in 2012, so the big data leads global information age. 2013, Internet of Things emerged. In 2015, Google Deep Learning is born. And ultimately, in 2019, the Algorithmic Accountability Act was enacted, was being discussed in the US right now. Also, in May 25, 2018, the GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulation, was approved by the European Union. So the GDPR is one of the most prevalent data protection laws that are being applied and enforced globally. So there are also our benchmark here in the Philippines, and also as a data protection officer, I use some of the standards imposed by the GDPR because they're more practical and more data subject friendly. Okay, so but there are times that there are provisions under Data Privacy Act of the Philippines that they're more beneficial for the data subject. So come 2020, so we now have the coronavirus. So the pandemic has created a lot of privacy issues and challenges. But of course, we have to balance public health safety over privacy, right? So how to create that balance, it's a matter of conducting the proper privacy impact assessments, and for the data protection officers to properly put security safeguards in place. So in 2020, the challenges that we're facing right now would be the hyper-personalization, open banking, or we call it open invisible banking, behavioral science, and explainable AI. So explainability of AI means that you have these are methods and techniques in the application of AI that results that the solution can be understood by humans. So it's the right to explanation. So what we're going, ultimately, privacy right now would also mean explainability and transparency in most of the AI and AM machine learning um, governance. So this would include data notification, consent, human-centered opportunities and challenges, and context. So going back to the three principles: legitimate purpose, proportionality, and transparency, they never change throughout time. So whether technologies change, the principles of privacy never change. That's it for my short presentation. I hope that I was able to impart some of my experience and knowledge um, in terms of facing the present and future challenges in data protection. And and as I mentioned, technologies would change and the approaches to them would change, but you always have to be steadfast in the principles of data protection, that it's always the data subject's rights that will prevail.
All right, Sasa. So, first question, let's talk about the book that you helped author, Data Privacy and Cybercrime Prevention in the Philippine Digital Age. It's actually described as the perfect reference for Filipinos who wish to become fully acquainted with their online rights and responsibilities under Philippine law. So, what are the key takeaways from number one, a corporate perspective, and number two, from the perspective of the ordinary Filipino who keeps most of their data and stuff online, especially in social media?
Yeah, we started writing the book in 2015 when the law was passed 3 years prior, and in fact, we started writing that at the time when there's no privacy commission yet, and the rules on the or in implementing rules on cybercrime and data privacy were not also implemented. So we wanted to create an advocacy, not just for the corporations but also for Filipinos in general. So for the corporations, that they must process information of the Filipinos ethically and legitimately. Like they must always ask for consent. They must always be transparent about how they process their information. That's one. And for the Filipinos to be more aware of their rights online, especially Filipinos are known to be social media savvy. We're actually in the top most social media users in the world, and you can just think about how much information they broadcast to the world. So um, we wanted to create that awareness that they should not first disclose information about themselves in social media, like providing IDs. Like it can be as simple as when you're bragging about going somewhere else, you take a picture of your ticket, and then there's the QR code there, and you're not aware that information about you are embedded in that QR. So those kinds of information that most Filipinos are not aware. So we wanted to create that campaign, and ultimately for them to know that cyberspace is an extension of their physical world. So whatever they see or whatever they acquire in the cyberspace are also in the same manner as how they also be applicable in the physical world. So in a way, you are your data. So it can be I call it an existential question, like do you know that you may be transformed into a series of algorithmic um, language, and your information will be processed by another computing system. So those kinds of information that they may not be aware of, we just kind of need to resurface it and make it a discourse. And right now, I think we kind of succeeded on that. and most of the people are now talking about it, especially right now in the time of pandemic. Like I have been asked a lot of questions, more than my my years of experience in data privacy uh, here during the pandemic than before. And I take it like a good thing that they're more aware now, because people will have to get your information everywhere you go and stuff like that. So those are the drivers why we created, or we published the book.
Right. Let's talk about digital identity in a bit, but
Yeah.
for now, I'll piggyback on what you said, which is with Filipinos being heavy usage of social media, and if you combine that with low awareness on data privacy and cybersecurity, that's of course a dangerous recipe. And in terms of cybersecurity, as the head of both the AI and the data policy departments from Union Bank, can you talk a little bit about what people can expect in the near future in terms of more innovative and technology-driven approaches with which the ordinary man on the street might not know about yet?
Yeah. So let me jump from what I said earlier to here. So being cyber secure in your space is a combination of both your responsibility and the responsibility of the corporation or the bank, or we call it a data controller that holds your information. So it's really a joint effort for you to be secure. So if the corporations are doing their job, you have to do your job, like always secure your information, making sure that your account numbers are not publicly disclosed, and so on. And as an AI and policy head in Union Bank, I have to ensure that we cover all the bases. So it's not just on the cybersecurity, that's the internal part, right? But on the internal policies and that we have to ensure that it's not just being secure, but also the customer experience behind it. So for example, we are embedding AI in our security tools and in our chatbots, and to ensure that they not just have the security in place, but also the customer experience that is very satisfactory for them. And in this sense, we can also detect uh, certain fraudulent activities. So for example, the your credit card is used by an unknown person, we can proactively detect that it's being used by someone else because of AI. So the AI can detect your purchasing behavior, and then analyze whether this, for example, an authorized purchase is consummated by you or not. So in the back end, that's what we also do. So it's really more of a, I call it the 3D, or like the corporation will, like for example, the bank would protect the external part, right? And then that's cybersecurity. For the internal, we're doing the AI, we're doing the policies, the data protection policies in place, and of course the third one would be the data subject, protecting him or herself. So that's where we where I would describe my job would be the 3D part. I call it the dancing of the 3D actors in cybersecurity.
Right. Going back to the topic of digital identity, I think uh, one major issue for most Filipinos is the national ID card. Personally, I know how easy it is to use when you use it, for example, at the airport, because I'm originally from Hong Kong. We've had our HK ID card years ago, but I think people want to know why don't we have it yet, and especially during this time of the pandemic, people still have to fill in manually health declaration forms, and at the same time, what are the opportunities and risks involved in the national ID card?
Yeah, okay. So coincidentally, I'm part of this group. We call it the Open Digital Trust Network, wherein it's composed of various thinkers like my counterparts, not just here in the Philippines, but also in other countries. So we're actually setting up or guiding principles as to how sovereign ID or federated ID should take place. But for here in the Philippines, we already have the legislation in place, the national ID. It's also the BSP that volunteered to conduct the processing or the re, the imprinting of the IDs and so on. I guess we have all the ingredients in place, you know. You just have to, put everything in the plate and then present it to the public. For that to happen, we have to get proper infrastructure in place. Well, infrastructure and architecture. So in the Open Digital Trust Network, we are espousing for different kinds of actors. So one, the data subject will be done, the national ID holder. Two will be the aggregator, meaning the one that would collect the information. So it can be the PSA or SSS and so on. Third would be the dispute resolution issuer. So meaning if there's a data quality issue or whether there's a question on the data field, so that's the dispute resolution issuer. And then fourth and the most important one is the verifier. So the verifiers would have the access and the power to authenticate the identity of the data subject. So for example, this person is a voter. So COMELEC would just click, oh yeah, this is a voter. This is his or her voter ID number. And for the BIR, yes, this person has a TIN. So they just have to click yes. So that person is already authenticated by the BIR. So it has to be set in that architecture for the national ID to be properly in place. So our suggestion really is to put it in blockchain. So other countries have already done it, like Estonia, wherein their national ID are in the chain, and the ID can also serve as an ATM card for any benefits or claims, right? So it can be seamless as that, and privacy will also be resolved, or privacy issues will also be resolved by that, because other people won't have visibility as to your information, because it's just you who will have the view of it. In the blockchain, everything is hashed, so it's only going to be the verifier and the data subject would have the visibility over your information. So it's really the perfect mixture of the national ID system, and it's privacy by design and so on, and it's also scalable, and it's also anti-fraud by design. So you can securely implement the policies in that system. So coming from the identity and access management, so these actors can have the proper IAM policies and authenticating powers in place, just for the Filipinos to have that national ID in place. So for me, it's just a matter of political will, time, and trusting the government for this to be pushed through, and we hope that it's going to be implemented soon, because right now Filipinos need it, especially the marginalized ones. Because imagine if we have national ID now in time of pandemic, it's easier and more convenient for for the government to disburse the social amelioration fund and so on. So that's my key takeaway for on national ID.
Let's go back to the organization that you mentioned earlier, the global organization.
It's the Open Digital Trust.
It is open to everybody,
No,
as long
they're
as
actually
certifications, qualifications.
no, it's just a group of selected people by the IIF, the International Group on Monetary Fund, something.
Right.
So it's they're mostly banks. So we are one of the participants in that. We call it like a small group
Small community worldwide.
community.
Right.
So we're also helping the IIF in creating policies as to how it should go, not just for the banking sector but also in other sectors that would have financial transactions with. So it's really it's still small, but it's like a consultative council of Elrond thing.
Good. Well, thank you so much, Sasa. Appreciate your insights. If our audience needs to find you, on LinkedIn, if they have any questions on data privacy, or if they just want to get in touch with you, do you mind sharing your LinkedIn so they know where to find you if they have any questions
Yeah,
after the
so
event?
they can just search my name, Maria Francesca Montes. So I'm just there.
All right, sounds good. Thank you so much, Maria, for spending your time with us, and looking forward to chat soon.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.